Good afternoon, sir. I am Paul Oladipo, the KB editor-in-chief and the fifth year medical student. And here with me is
Sir. KB, good
KB,
afternoon.
So we are very grateful that you are granting us this opportunity to interview you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, sir. So our viewers they would like to know about your upbringing and what inspired you to pursue a career in medicine and what were some of the key challenges and highlights of your medical school experience.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I grew up in Lagos. I was born and bred in Lagos, as we used to say, even though my parents came from Ogun State, and I started secondary school education at Bat Freeman High School here in Surulere, but finished secondary school education at Adeolo Lutola College, Ijebu-Ode. As at that time, I wasn't really decided what I was going to study, even though one could say that I was an all-rounder. I was doing excellently well in the sciences and had one of the top 10 best results in the then Western states. That was in 1973. So, having had A's in the sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, it seemed natural to go into medicine because as it was then, so it is still now. Medicine required you to have the highest scores. So even though one did not plan really to become or to study medicine, medicine was also attractive because it's the prestige it had in society and the ability to help people. It gave you the opportunity to help people. So all that taken together naturally pushed me into medicine, and 44 years down the line after leaving medical school, I have no regrets at all for having made that decision to study medicine. The second leg of your question was about my
Challenges and medical school experience.
well, medical school was very interesting for us. Challenges, I'm not too sure, but medical school was very interesting for us, particularly because the government then was intentional about producing doctors for Nigeria. And the College of Medicine University of Lagos was the only college of medicine then. I mean, in the other universities, Ahmadu Bello, Ibadan, Ife, and so on, they had faculties of medicine. So it was only in Lagos that you had a College of Medicine. What that meant was that the College of Medicine was a semi-autonomous unit of the University of Lagos. It had direct funding, more or less direct funding. And this one also got grants from international agencies. So the medical school was well, structured. The environment was, where you have all shops now, used to be a cafeteria. So you have decent meals for next to nothing. And then, our friends who are studying other courses in Akoka used to come and visit us on Sundays. So that because, you'll have a cut off a chicken, for your Sunday lunch. So our friends will come and visit us so that they could enjoy what. So the government and the supporting agencies made medical school very interesting, simply because they were hoping to attract people to study medicine. So the environment was conducive, and all you needed to do was to study, to read, and pass your exams, and of course do very well and move on. Um, I know that since then, more medical schools have been established, and once you rapidly expand the medical school spaces, there will be a slight trade-off in quality, so the kind of facilities that we had then are probably not there now, although you can argue that some new technologies have also come into place. But by and large, medical school was very, very interesting. And for some of us that also had the opportunity of being enrolled into the KB Club. That even made it more interesting because the KB Club, the leading club in the colleges at that time, the leading club in the university as at that time, consisted of highly disciplined people because the selection criteria were very strict and you had to be in good academic standing to be in the KB Club. So all that made medical school very interesting for us. And then for me in particular, I also had a stint in university student politics. So being a member of the KB Club, that meant that naturally I had some sorry
Leadership skills.
leadership skills, and then some friends and all the members of the KB Club, of course, supported my campaign. First tried to become the medical student president, which didn't work out, but then became a member of the House of Rep and the Speaker of the Students' Union. I don't know whether they still have Speaker of the Student for the University of Lagos, not for.
No, we have just for AMSU.
No, I was Speaker of the Students' Union, University of Lagos. So you had the President, Vice President, then you have the Speaker, for the whole of the university. So we should then talk about challenge. Maybe the major challenge that we then had was what students used to do, their LUTH struggles that we had, when the university was shut down and when we were at risk of being expelled from the university because of the Ali Must Go student riots of 1978. Even though as a student union leader, I would not say that we were directly responsible for the riots, but once we started the protest, of course, it got out of hands, and don't know who and who are the people busy causing trouble in town. So, but of course, since you are the one who called the protest, there was, there was an attempt to hold the student union leaders responsible for that. But I must pay tribute to the memory of the then Vice Chancellor, the late Professor Ajayi, who very forthright leader, very distinguished academic, well-renowned historian, stood his ground that, because when I called the parliament meeting, the university officials were there, so they witnessed that the decision to start the protest was democratically made. It wasn't imposed on the students' body. So the majority decided that, the students will go on protest. So he had all the evidence. So therefore, he decided not to sacrifice the leadership of the student union, even though it cost him his own job. So I pay tribute to his memory. So that was the major challenge that one had.
Very, very beautiful story, sir. Very beautiful story. And you mentioned the KB Club. I was just about to ask you about the KB Club. Because I went through our records and I noticed you're a KB editor, by the way. And while I was reading your book, My Life, My Medicine, I'm not able to finish it, but a very beautiful piece, sir. I'm the KB editor right now. I'm proud to work in your shoes, sir, because I'm also looking at writing a book when I finish my education. So, what are some of your fondest memories from the KB Club, from your time in the KB Club, sir?
Okay, the KB Club is a highly disciplined organization, as I said, and we had focus, and I believe the club still has focus. And we were fortunate to also have great patrons. One of our patrons was the late Professor Femi Pierce, Deji Femi Pierce. He was a professor of medicine, was our teacher, very amiable, very friendly. In fact, was provost of the college at one time, was provost CMD of LUTH, and he was acting vice chancellor at another time. So very distinguished academic. So we had mentors like that. So there was no way that we wouldn't excel. And Professor Pierce, as at that time, was trying to start a resort somewhere in Badagry. I think it's called Whispering Palms. So at that time, it was still in its formative stages, but he had acquired the space, and there was a nice lagoon front, and he had paddle canoes and all kinds of things. And he would take members of the KB Klub, to go there for a picnic, provide the meals and so on. And we, of course, being mentored by such great men meant that we were looking up to them, and that uh, we were already on the course, on the path, you know. So we looked up to them, and we determined that we must also succeed. So we thank such great men like Professor Pierce. There were some other patrons who were not in academics, or who are not even doctors. I can't remember their names now, but I can't forget Professor Femi Pierce, because he was my teacher, and also he impacted on our lives. So KB Club therefore contributed into molding us, you know, especially when you look at the triple objectives of academics, philanthropy, and socials. All those objectives are aimed at making you grow up as a complete man devoted to society. The philanthropy aspect ensures that we also contribute to society, so that the underprivileged. So we used to visit schools, Atodaolu school, Paseli school for the blind, and SOS, children's homes for motherless babies, homes, and so on. So we used to visit and raise funds and make donations to those places. And also we used to take the children from Paseli school and from Atodolu school on picnics. We used to organize just to give them some fun, so to make them feel. So all that, all those commitments, made us to grow into responsible people. So I think that the KB Club, played a major role in my development as a person.
Okay. Public health and epidemiology, they play vital roles in improving lives, as we saw during the Ebola crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and recently the monkeypox crisis. So, what inspired you to pursue this field, and how did your experience shape your contribution during the pandemic?
Okay, well, public health is that field that enables you to be able to impact on populations, as opposed to other subspecialties of medicine where you treat individual patients. So when I graduated, and after my housemanship, against my wish, I was posted to a rural area for the National Youth Service. And I was responsible for the health services of a population of about 250 people. So there was no medical officer of health. So I was the medical officer of health as a youth corps, the then ZA local government area of the old Anambra state. So during that period, I had no choice but to practice public health, even though I had not really been trained as a specialist in public health beyond the initial introduction to public health in medical school. So that experience was an eye-opener. I saw firsthand what citizens go through in communities. So, and in fact, my first paper, my first publication, scientific publication, came out of that experience. By the time I was finishing my youth service, I think I delivered about 365 pregnant mothers during that 1 year. And I wrote a paper out of it. I think I was looking at the birth weight patterns of children in that community. So rapidly after that, since that made up my mind, I proceeded out of the country to Columbia University in New York, where I had my Master of Public Health degree. I was very ambitious. I became very ambitious because my ambition, as at that time, MPH was like, I would like say it was, but it was a highly valued qualification as at that time. In fact, if you had the MPH, You know, as at 1982, you could get appointed as a consultant. So I was trying to become one of the youngest consultants. Well, so I got my MPH from Colombia in 1984 and tried to run back home so that I could get appointed as a consultant. Well, by the time I got back, that scheme, of giving them specialist or of consultant appointments stopped some 3 or 4 months before I came back. So I had no choice now but to go back into the residency training program and complete the fellowship program. Remember, the fellowship program in public health, I think the first set was around 1980-81. So by that 84-85, they felt that for 5 years they've now been training. That was why they shut the gate on admitting MPH. But that's not to say that MPH is not recognized as a specialist degree or a specialist qualification. It is, but it's just that now, in fact, as at that time, I was offered the senior registrarship. So it was no longer qualifying you to be a consultant. So you can see that my experience at Ezza local government determined for me or should or created the interest in me for studying public health, because I saw that without public health, if you are treating patients, particularly babies for diarrheal disease, you treat them this week and they will come back the following week because you have not addressed the social determinants of health. You've not addressed the water they are drinking. You've not addressed the questions of how the food they are being given is prepared. So public health does all that. In addition, public health helps you to uh, own your skills in research and provide evidence for decision making. In epidemiology, so that's essentially what you are doing. You are an investigator. So you are looking for evidence. So, and you use that evidence to be able to prevent and control disease outbreaks. And in health systems, you use evidence to improve on policy, because the evidence will feed your decision making. So, I don't see any other field as interesting as public health, because it solves the problems of large numbers of people at a time, as opposed to other subspecialties that are dealing with individuals.
All right, sir. In your various academic leadership roles, from the coordinator of the community-based medical education to head of department, what challenges did you face and what milestone are you most proud of?
Well, thank you very much. The major challenge for anybody hoping to lead any institution, any organization, it's the people you have to work with. People who are already used to one way of doing things, and now you are saying that we need to do things in another way. So there's always some resistance to change. When I was appointed as the coordinator of the community-based medical education and services program, the KUBMES program of the then Ogun State University, I was the first coordinator. So now we are introducing more or less a new curriculum. We were saying that instead of training the medical students only in the teaching hospital, we will now be training them at the various levels of the health system. Because when they graduate, they are not all going to practice in the teaching hospital. So therefore, we must train them at health centers, we must train them at general hospitals, and then we must train them in the teaching hospital. So that was what we introduced. And of course, the benefit of that is that it expanded the exposure of the students, the medical students, so they became more or less, we were trying to produce what we call 5-star doctors, the doctors that could work at any level, rather than doctors that are used to the system of the teaching hospital alone. The other advantage of it is that in the health centers, the presence of specialists are now felt at the health centers, because public health physicians who take the students there were also available now to assist members of the communities to treat their common ailments. Ordinarily, some communities may not even have access to doctors, not to talk of specialist public health physicians. But now, because of the COVMES programs, we were visiting those communities and we are providing specialist public health services. The same thing at the general hospitals. Some general hospitals have consultants, but those consultants were more or less isolated. But now we are bringing the university, the teaching hospital culture to them, and we are saying that, oh, we'll be having ground round every Wednesday in your general hospital. So we are keeping them on their toes. Consultants in the general hospitals also benefited from the regular interactions with consultants coming from the teaching hospitals. And at the same time, the medical students were also benefiting. So in Ogun State, we were using Ijebu General Hospital and Abeokuta General Hospital. So our students were training in Abeokuta, training in Ijebu and training in Shagamu, where the teaching hospital is. So I think that was a unique experience. But of course, I hinted you about the challenge. People were used to doing things one way, and now you are introducing something. So no vehicle was provided for the coordinator. The coordinator was expected to run by foot from from Shagamu to Ijebode to Abeokuta. Of course, we were also using health centers. We had the health center to Deremo and some other places. So as coordinator, you had to visit all those places. And as coordinators, you had to make accommodation arrangements in Abeokuta and Ijebode for the students, because they will stay in those general hospitals, if I remember now, for a total of 4 months, 1 month in each of the medical specialties, medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics, and surgery. Apart from their postings to the health centers, which I mentioned, the postings to the health centers, because we were using Oderemo, they could return to Shagam. Oderemo wasn't too far from, yes. But if you are posting students for surgery, you can't say that by 4 o'clock they should close, because surgical emergencies can occur at 7 or 8. So they have to be in Abeokuta so that they can maximize their experiences. So those were challenges, but as coordinator, it was your responsibility to arrange accommodation for them. So in Abeokuta, all that you needed to do is to use the public health training. Liaise with the principal. There's a trade center in Abeokuta. So arrange the postings to occur when the students of the trade center were on holidays, so that their dormitories would be vacant. Then I'll take over the dormitories, clean them up, modest funds. So you don't need to go and hire somewhere, so that will take care of that. And then I think that one of the parents of the students also gave us a house in Abeokuta that we could keep the students. The same thing in Ijebode. So those were challenges, but public health training had prepared one to be able to communicate, because communication is one of the training skills that you must get in public health. Of course, it was also one of the skills we got from KB Klub, which you all have. So we must be able to communicate. You must be able to interact. You must be able to approach people, and I mean, politely, decently, but confidently. And because we're able to do that, that was why we were able to get all the facilities at our disposal. But the major challenge always remains the human factor, because people have been doing things this way, and now you have changed it. When I became head of department, in the College of Medicine, you are required to set exams, questions, maybe some 2-3 weeks before the exam. And then we had a strong room or strong somewhere where you will keep, they will lock it, 3 different people with 3 different padlocks, all kinds of strategies. So when I became head of department, and then of course the departmental secretaries had some huge typewriters that they will use to type the questions, and then they had They had these stencil papers, and you won't be familiar with those ones. So those stencil papers were what they type the questions on, and then you go and roll them. There are some equipments. I don't. You won't know the equipments. You put the stencil paper there, you start rolling them, and the printed copies will start coming out. So by the time I became head of department, I wasn't doing questions 3 weeks to the exam. And my departmental secretary couldn't understand. She was like, this young boy that they made head of department will soon run into trouble. But the truth was that I had a computer. I'm not sure whether laptops were common then, but I had a desktop or something, but I had a computer and printer at home. So I won't do any stencil, because the danger with stencil is that it had a carbon paper in between. So you take the stencil, you are rolling, the carbon paper, you forgot it. Uh-huh. So what happens to that carbon paper?
And we used to reproduce the question.
Yeah, and it could fly all over the place. So, but if you are using the computer, you could password your computer, you could do all kinds of things, and then the day of the question of the exam, 7 o'clock, I can print out, except if NEPA. I'm not sure NEPA was this bad then. You know, at least they spared the hospital. They spared the hospital there. So you print out your questions, it will just be oven fresh. You go to the exam. So, like, my confidential secretary or departmental secretary was like, she couldn't understand what this young man was doing. But fortunately, there was no time that the exams didn't hold as scheduled, because you are using modern technology, which she didn't know how to use computer. She didn't even know whether I had one at all. So that resistance was there, that this is how we used to do it. Now, and when I became CMD, the same thing, of course, occurred. Having been trained as a public health physician, and my concentration was in administration, maternal and child health administration. So before I became CMD, I already had a plan of action. So I had already analyzed the problems of the hospital, and I was taking them off one by one. But it's like, what is this guy doing? Like, this is how we've been doing it. And I said, no, you don't need to do it that way all the time. And one particular incident or instance that I will give is when you look at when I became CMD, no pediatric incubator was functional in the whole hospital, not one single one. So we are using hot water bottles. They will put the babies in the carcass of the incubator, quite alright, but put hot water bottle. So yeah, we had financial challenges, so we couldn't buy everything that we wanted to buy, but you can think out of the box. If one single incubator was going to cost, let us say, about 3 or 4 million naira then, I was fortunate to have been introduced to one Nigerian based in the United Kingdom. He was at Imperial College London, a biomedical engineer, and he designed or devised a strategy of repairing incubators, pediatric incubators. So it was introduced to me by a former president of the National Postgraduate Medical College, who himself was a pediatrician, Professor Azubike. So when he introduced this gentleman to me, I think his name is Professor Hippolyte Amadi, I had a chat with him. And of course, he had the rate at which he would repair each incubator. And I said, okay, so if I ask you to do 10 incubators for me for 4 million, how about that? So the time you might say, okay, we use the 4 million to buy one incubator, but that can only save one baby at a time. So we use the 4 million to do 10 incubators. In fact, he said I should never mention how much he did it for me, for LUTH, anywhere else, because his rates were far higher than that. But then I drove him hard. I said, look, if we're able to do this, it will be groundbreaking. So he did the first 10. So we were able now to save 10 babies at a time. And then we increased the numbers. As at the time I left at CMB, we had the largest number of incubators in any single hospital in the whole country. I think we had about 44 functional incubators. Some were new. We were able to buy some new ones. And some, I think medical students, I'm not sure whether they were KB Klub. Some medical students raised some funds and donated 2 incubators also to the hospital. So by the time I was leaving, we had 44 functional incubators, but I don't know what is the state now. Yes.
Well, very brilliant, very expansive. The following question was actually to ask you about your experience being the CMD of the Chief Medical Director and your accomplishment. So you really gone through.
Well, but I could also mention that when I became CMD, we of course decided that a teaching hospital should be what it is. It's not a health center, or it's not a primary health center, but a higher health facility, and therefore we should move into providing the upper end technology in the country. So we worked on renal transplantation. In fact, the patient we did in 2011 is still alive. So and the way to do, we also worked on open heart surgery. I'm sure you will see some of this in the book. We worked on open heart surgery. We worked on laparoscopic surgery so that you can have pinhole surgery so that you reduce patient waiting time, length of stay in hospital, so that you do the surgery today, the following morning, or within 1 to 2 days, the patient has gone home. So you're able to do more patients and they go on. So in order to be able to do that, we had to identify, assemble, and train teams. So I identified and assembled a team, and I sent them to Egypt, Mansoura Hospital in Egypt, for training in renal transplantation. I identified and assembled a team. They were up to 10, 12 people, each team, 10 to 12 people. I identified the team, assembled them, and sent them off to India, to Frontline Hospital. It's a cardiac hospital. That's where they train them for open heart surgery. Identify another team, send them to Germany for intensive care. So some of them are still around. They are big consultants now. So once you adopt a plan, and you pursue it passionately, you get the kind of results that you want to get. The only thing you can hope for is sustainability, particularly in this environment where times are unstable.
Right. That is so much. Right, so moving on, I wanted to ask, as recent president of the National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria, what advice will you give to aspiring medical students and young doctors that would likely want to follow in your steps?
Okay, so the major advice I will give to young people is to understand the concept of delayed gratification. The concept of delayed gratification. When I finished my youth service, I got an employment in a private medical center. And in those days, the private medical centers or private hospitals in Lagos paid like 3 to 4 times what the public service paid. So it was good money. It was good money. Now to leave all that and go back to school, unless you understand the concept of delayed gratification, it will be difficult for you. The tendency is you want to keep on enjoying the good time, and then, that's immediate gratification. So you must adopt the concept of delayed gratification. So went back to school, and when I came back from Colombia, and I couldn't get registered to be able to get a consultant position, I also got an offer from a private hospital. I think it was either in Sokoto or Maiduguri, one of those places. They are doing very well, just a private hospital doing very well, and they needed somebody with an embellished qualification to add to their staff. I didn't need to put down money. They had already established the hospital, and they wanted to put me as one of the maybe the directors or something. Again, that will have been immediate gratification. But again, I declined that and went into the residency program so that I could get the fellowship, since the MPH was no longer recognized for consultant appointment. So the teaching hospital at that time was paying like 300 naira per month. Whereas in the private sector, if you were just MBBS, you got over 1,000 naira. That was 3 times what they were paying. So delayed gratification. So you must be focused and intentional about your long-term goals. Don't be distracted by immediate gains. And there are several other aspects. The other aspects, of course, in pursuing this career now, you come across young people, you have to mentor them, you know, and you'll be surprised that some of the people you mentored 20 years ago, now they are directors, some are permanent secretaries. That's a source of joy on its own. So that is also another gratification, that anywhere you get to, people are standing up to say, good morning, sir, good morning, sir. So that's social investment, and it has its rewards. It's unfortunate that things have become disorientated in society, and the only achievement that society wants to be looking at is financial. It is not, in my opinion, it is not the most important. Of course, I'm not saying that finance you need to wear decent shirts, you need to put on a decent tie, you need to look good, but if you're a professional and you have your competencies and skills, you will always look good, and you will always be above average. As long as you don't go to Sonia, I'm not demarketing them. You don't go to flamboyant social events. You don't spend above your income. You structure your expenditure. The conversation we were having earlier on today was also along that line.
Yeah.
Knowing what is coming in for you, and then having your priorities as to where you want to put it. Those would be, in summary, my advice for the young people, for them to stay focused, for them not to be in a hurry, because the trajectory for everybody is already there, and there are different curves. Some people go gradually like this. At the end of the day, you get to where you are going. Some people go too fast. Yeah. So when if you look at some of my colleagues went to medical school together, instead of they went into private practice, made quick money, who are still postgraduate students.
Yes, sir.
But 20 years, 30 years after, we all eat rice, we all eat bread, we all eat the same food, and and some of us have professor after our names. In addition to being able to eat rice and eat bread. I hope you understand what
Yes,
I'm
sir.
saying. So that wherever they got to, you will also get there, provided you don't engage in flamboyant or unnecessary expenditure. You structure and the good thing about academic life is it disciplines you. So you structure your life. As if you're outside there, you want to be like them outside. So as a young academic, when I go to family or social events, They already know. They say, that professor, leave him alone. Because I won't scream. So for me, it was enough that I could find the time to come to your events. So if I'm going to give you anything, I put in an envelope and give you, and I'll be looking. Yes, right.
From being the HOD to being the chief medical director at LUTH to being the president of National Postgraduate Medical College of Nigeria, what key qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership in healthcare, and especially in high pressure situations like pandemic?
I think the first thing is discipline, self-discipline, and self-denial. You must be able, because as a leader, if you do not make the effort to make sacrifices on behalf of the people you are leading, you will not have confidence in you. The second thing is integrity. If you say it, it must be it. Once you are not a person of integrity, then it becomes a challenge. Because it means anything goes. And therefore, you can't hold the people under you accountable. They too can do anything goes. Yeah, they say, well, your guys. So, discipline, integrity, and then, of course, focus. You must have an objective. So, because to be a leader, if you don't have any objective, so where are you leading them to? You must have an objective and you stay focused to the objective. But of course, in order to tie it together, you must communicate. You must communicate with the people you are leading. You must tell them this is, for some people, they will understand early. For some people, in fact, there were people who never understood what I was doing when I was CMD. It was only after I had left and I didn't ask them to come. They now come and say, all the things we are doing, now we understand you. They are now understanding the benefits of hindsight because you can now compare a different situation. Some people will understand early, but the responsibility is to communicate. You can't get 100%. You can't carry 100% alone. But as long as you're able to carry the majority along, you get the things done. And as long as you have objectives, you tick your objectives. And as I said, and if you read my book, My Life, My Medicine, you'll see it there. So when I was coming in, I already had the plan of action. So at the time I was leaving, I was just thinking. And in any case, when I was appointed, I would say that my letter of appointment was unique because Mr. President specifically required me to turn around the hospital within 2 years. Most letters of appointment don't say that. They just say, congratulations, Mr. President has approved your appointment. But in my own case, the letter said, Mr. President has approved your appointment and he has requested that, I can show you a copy of the letter, I have it here. But he specifically said that you're expected to turn around the hospital within 2 years. So I had the direct performance index. So within 2 years, and to the glory of God, I thank God for His grace and some opportunities that also coincided with my headship of the hospital. So we were able to turn within 1 year, the number of surgeries performed in the hospital rose from 900 to 5,000. So, yeah, because when I came in, surgical residency accreditation were withdrawn from the hospital. The only functional operation theater was in A&E. All the operating theaters were shut down. Things were bad. And I think that was why the president said I was expected to turn around the hospital within 2 years. And my public health training, my medical school training, my membership of the KB Klub, the discipline, and the need to maintain the name of those organizations propelled one to achieve whatever one achieved.
Mentorship is very vital for younger doctors and for medical students. You already mentioned Professor Ayodele Femi PS as one of your mentors. What other mentors do you have, and how did they shape your path? What advice do you have for those entering the field?
Well, I had several mentors. You just mentioned Professor Bijifemi Pias, Dr. Bashir, Professor Bashir Akonde. You need to know them. I think he retired before you got to medical school, but was professor of surgery here. Several of them, Professor uh, Pekumalaosa, who was in public health. He was also registrar of the National Postgraduate Medical College. In fact, he was the provost of the College of Health Sciences at Ogun State University, who headhunted me. He was the one who came to insist that I must come and join them in, in Shagamu. And as soon as I got to Shagamu, made me immediately the coordinator of the COVNES community-based medical education program. And then, of course, there was Professor Elebute, the husband and wife. Professor Ade Elebute was a surgeon. The wife was, yeah, he's still alive. He's a retired professor of physiology. Two of them were teachers. So they, among several others, in the college mentored us. And I remain grateful for the opportunity to have learned from them.
Nigeria and many other African nations face unique public health challenges. What do you think are the most pressing global health issues today, and how can nations like Nigeria lead the way in addressing them?
Okay, so the global issues, of course, you'll be looking at disease issues and you're looking at health system issues. For disease issues, countries like Nigeria are facing dual epidemics. We used to be known to be burdened with communicable diseases. The major causes of mortality were malaria, diarrheal diseases, respiratory infections, and so on. But that was then. Now we are also now confronted by epidemics of non-communicable diseases. In 1990-92, when we conducted the national survey of non-communicable diseases, the prevalence of hypertension was below 10%. In 2003, I was part of a team that did another mini survey, and the prevalence of hypertension was 28%. As at today, the prevalence of hypertension is between 35 and 40%. So every 1 in 3 adults between the ages of 18 to 65 is hypertensive. So you can see that that is a huge burden of disease. And I just use hypertension. The same thing for diabetes, the same thing for cardiovascular disease and chronic respiratory diseases. So it's a global challenge, and for developing countries like Nigeria, the situation is worse because even for non-communicable diseases, in developed countries, most mortalities will occur after the age of 70 years. But for developing countries, most of the mortalities are occurring below the age of 70 years. And that has significant implications for economic development. Because when people die below the age of 70, we are having lost years of productivity. So it's going to be keeping the economy down. So what we need to do as countries is to take health more seriously. We need to take health more seriously by funding it, because there's no free lunch even in Freetown. We need to fund it. Funding health also includes training more health workers and retraining more health workers. So we must train more and we must retain more. So we must be intentional about what we are doing. So if you want to train for a sport, yes, we can train for a sport, but you cannot also neglect or ignore the health needs of the people. So I think those would be my thoughts on the Nigerian systems. So I've addressed the disease questions, the health system question largely requires funding,
Funding.
health manpower production and retention, and then of course the technology, and then providing a local base for manufacture of drugs and consumables.
Right. So you mentioned technology. That brings me to the next question. Innovation is transforming healthcare. From your experience, how can the Nigerian healthcare system integrate new technologies? I mean, these days we have telemedicine, we have AI, just to improve patient care. In your opinion, sir?
Well, the first step, again, we go back to funding. And one area that we are not funding is research. We have to fund research deliberately. If you fund research, then you'll be able to get innovative solutions. Because you can't get innovative solutions without research. So if you fund research, you get innovative solutions. So you have resident doctors. When I was CND, I think we used to have up to about 400-500 resident doctors in this hospital alone. So and if you have them all over, and each one of them has to conduct some study. So in their respective fields, if the research is funded, I understand now they are providing some modest funds for them. But if research is funded, then all kinds of ideas can come up. So the next stage is for us to be intentional about linking the gown and the town, so that the products of research are translated into products that can improve the health system. So that next stage is also very critical, but it has to be pushed by policy, by leadership, and by political will.
Thanks so much, sir. Sir, about your legacy, how would you like to be remembered for your contribution to the Nigerian healthcare system and beyond, sir?
I played my role.
Yes, sir. How would
I
you like
played
to be
my
remembered?
role very well.
Brilliant, sir. Brilliant, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The theme of this edition of MediPhil is Zenith, celebrating heroes at their pinnacle. How does this resonate with you, sir?
Well, to be honest with you, this whole exercise, I see it as an opportunity to encourage younger people or people coming behind, so that they will see that it is doable, and they will be encouraged. And like I said at the beginning, they will also imbibe the culture of delayed gratification, so that they know that if they contribute, if they make all the efforts, at the end of the day, they will be recognized. And that was why I accepted to take part in the interview.
Thank you very much, sir. So we've discussed your remarkable career. So how do you maintain a work-life balance? And could you share some of your personal interests or hobbies outside your professional responsibilities?
Thank you. Well, I read, and I read outside medicine. If you look at my shelf, you will see the anatomy of power, you will see my watch,
Yeah.
you will see the end of poverty, you will see why nations fail, and then of course you see some autobiographies of some leaders. You see the one by Professor Akinsanya Lucas. I'm sure you still read the shortest book of preventive medicine by Lucas Angeles. Lucas is not a British person, he's a Nigerian, or was a Nigerian. Now. So reading is one of my hobby. I can't do without books. And then I play table tennis. I tried playing lawn tennis, but I found out that I can't keep with the pace again. Maybe I'm getting younger. Yeah.
Any parting words for our readers in this mountain, sir? What would you like to give us as a parting word, sir?
To be disciplined, focused, and intentional about your objectives in life. And then, of course, to know that if you have defined objectives and you pursue them, you will get your goals at the end of the day.
Yes, sir. Very excellent, sir. And for that, sir, we come to the end of this interview, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Yes.
Yes, sir.